Top 3 books that every beginner investor should read. That's what we're talking about on this episode of Beyond the Stock Price. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Stock Price. My name is Devrhoid Davis and thank you for tuning in. Well, you've seen the title of the video. On this episode, we're going to be talking about 3 books that all beginner investors should read. Now, I should mention that these are just my opinions. These books are in fact endorsements, and you can actually purchase any one of them by clicking the link in the description below. The links below are actually my Amazon Associates link, and so if you actually purchase the books through those links, I will get a small commission for that purchase. These are books that I've personally read. I'm actually in the process of rereading one of them at this point in time, and they are books that I think that every beginner investor should go through cover to cover in order to, one, develop your financial literacy, meaning just how much you really understand. These are books that I believe that every beginner investor should read in order to improve their financial intelligence. We call it your financial IQ, and that's something that I borrowed from Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is actually not on this list. But these are books that particularly investors who are looking to get into the stock market should read and should spend some time trying to really absorb and trying to get the lessons and trying to really understand the principles as well as the concepts that are being taught in these books. So without further ado, let me get to book number 1. So book number 1 is The Intelligent Investor. The Intelligent Investor was written by Ben Graham, who was a teacher of Warren Buffett, who is probably the most famous value investor of all time and probably one of the richest. He's either number 3 or number 4 on the Forbes 400 in terms of the richest billionaires in the world. It's a fairly compact book, but it's a very easy read, and it's a really good introduction for investors in terms of developing their philosophy around which stocks they will actually invest in, or rather I should say which companies they will actually invest in. The Intelligent Investor is a classic for many seasoned investors, primarily those from the value investing school of thought, but it's also a very educational read, and it's one that I'm sure you would have come across in just any list that talks about recommendations for books for stock market investing. This is definitely going to be on it. So in this book, you're actually going to learn a little bit about portfolio strategies. You're going to learn about comparing different investments of different types. You're going to learn how to use a few of the key financial ratios for the different types of businesses, whether you're talking about long-standing blue chip stocks or even how to value those types of companies. You're also going to learn about how to deal with your investment advisor. You're going to learn how to actually analyze different companies and how to make comparisons between the different issues or different types of securities. Now, there's a bigger version of this book called Security Analysis. It's an older book, but it's also a textbook, and it's not one that I'm going to necessarily suggest that is a must read, but certainly The Intelligent Investor is a must read for any serious investor in equities or in the stock market. Number 2 is actually a second book by Benjamin Graham. It is The Interpretation of Financial Statements. This book is a very small book. It's actually a truncated version of The Intelligent Investor, but it's talking specifically about how to analyze and interpret financial statements, and it goes through the different items that you will encounter on different financial statements and how to use those items or how to think about those items in terms of the security or the stock, the company that you're actually trying to analyze. This is a book that will go through a lot of the definitions. It gives you strict definitions about different terms, and it's one of the books that I have read and reread. And if ever I tend to happen upon a financial statement and I see a term that I don't really see very often or even know how to use, necessarily in the best case, then I will always return to the interpretation of financial statements just to see how do I really use this new information and how do I think about the information that this variable or this line item is presenting to me from the financial statements. So definitely one of the books that I recommend that every beginner investor read, especially if you're going to adopt the value investing philosophy of buying companies and not just stock. It's a fairly small book. It's just over 110 pages, and it's also a fairly inexpensive book which you can pick up on Amazon for just a few dollars. Link in the description. Number 3 on my list is The Little Book of Valuation by Professor Aswath Damodaran. Now, this little book is probably one of the best kept secrets, or well, I shouldn't even say it's a secret, but it's a very effective tool to have in your toolbox as an investor in equities. The primary advantage of this book is that it literally takes you through exercises in valuation using Professor Damodaran's new model of the discounted cash flow. Now, Professor Damodaran is known as the Dean of Valuation, and he has a lot of content on YouTube as well as on his website. But the book in and of itself, I think, is an excellent read. It's more than just a book that you read. It's actually a guide. This is effectively a guide to valuation, and it doesn't matter whether or not you're interested in, say, valuation as an academic subject. If you're going to be investing in stocks, then you definitely want to have this book in your toolkit. So that's basically it, guys. 3 books that you should read if you're a beginner investor. We're starting out with kind of the basics or an overview in The Intelligent Investor, and then you get into the nitty-gritty of understanding financial statements using the interpretation of financial statements, again by Benjamin Graham, and then lastly understanding valuation and how to actually pick stock from Professor Damodaran. Alright, so with that said, I'm going to end the video here, but guys, be sure to like and subscribe. Click the thumbs up button to like this video, and be sure to share the video with a friend who may have a similar interest. Hello investors, my name is Devrhoid Davis and you're watching Beyond the Stock Price. So book number 1 is The Intelligent Investor. So book number 1 is Number 2 is actually a second book by Benjamin Graham. It's The Interpretation of Financial Statements. Number 2 is The Interpretation of Financial Statements. Number 2 is The Interpretation of Financial Statements also by Benjamin Graham. Now, this book it's a fairly small book. It's just over 110 pages, and it's also a fairly inexpensive book which you can pick up on Amazon for just a few dollars. Link in the description. Number 3 on my list is The Little Book of Valuation by Professor Aswath Damodaran. Now, Professor Damodaran is Number 3 on my list is The Little Book of Valuation by Professor Aswath Damodaran. Now, Professor Damodaran Professor Damodaran is, oh wait. Number 3 on my list is The Little Book of Valuation by Professor Aswa Damodaran.